Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about the charges just announced by the Department of Justice against three defendants who committed acts of violence or at least destruction of property involving Tesla dealerships. Now, if you were paying attention for the last few days, you know that this has been a proliferating trend where people obviously protesting against the role of, the decisions of, the complete mystery, who the hell is this guy of Elon Musk, have let their displeasure be known by going to Tesla dealerships and having protests and the like. But some of them have committed violence, and Pam Bondi came out of the box calling that domestic terrorism, and we were going to prosecute them to the full extent of the law, and now they have brought charges. Okay. First, these are crimes. You know, it goes well beyond the First Amendment. If you take Molotov cocktail, well, let me give you the conduct that is involved with each of these three people. One from Oregon, one from South Carolina, one from Colorado. So one guy he's got an AR-15 that's suppressed. He throws about 8 Molotov cocktails at a Tesla dealership. Another guy in Colorado tries to light Teslas on fire with Molotov cocktails, and he had different kinds of dangerous materials that you're not supposed to have that could produce incendiary weapons. Third guy in Charleston wrote profane messages against President Trump around Tesla charging stations. You've seen those, in urban areas where people have Teslas, and then he lit the charging stations on fire with Molotov cocktails. No dispute, crimes here. But what kind of crimes, and does it deserve to have the book thrown at them? Let me start with what the Attorney General said when these charges were announced. The days of committing crimes without consequence have ended. What days would that be? What are you trying to say? What malarkey are you trying to peddle against the previous administration? And the whole tone, the federal government is supposed to get up, make charges with sobriety, maybe a little bit of color, but this cowgirlish, days of committing crimes without consequences have ended is really kind of, for former federal prosecutors, gag me with a spoon kind of territory. Let this be a warning. If you join this wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, the Department of Justice will put you behind bars. More of the same, small town sheriff, just completely wrong tone and note for when you bring charges. When you bring charges, you explain the allegations so the American public knows about them. Maybe when you convict, you have a little bit of triumphalism of saying, we're gratified the jury did this, and this should be a warning to people who would think about doing the same thing as this defendant. But that this kind of the days of committing crime without consequence have ended is really of a piece with what has been so off-key, disappointing, tin-earish about her. She's just a slavish fan and a political arm of President Trump, and not the foremost, or not appropriately the foremost federal law enforcement officer of the United States. That's one. Two, the fact of the charges. And, the question is, there's some reason to think that they storm into action specifically because somebody who's a friend of Donald Trump's and part of the government of Donald Trump, though how and why we don't understand yet, and some of these lawsuits may uncover what has been the victim of activities. And that ain't right either. You do justice without fear or favor, And if somehow they are beating their breasts and making excessive charges because he is perceived as a special friend of the state, that again, not the role of the Department of Justice. And incidentally, this is hot off the presses, but Bondi has called this domestic terrorism. Now, there's a way to charge this that it would include. Domestic terrorism is not a freestanding federal offense, but there is a way to charge it to include that element, as opposed to the normal way to charge this would be, notwithstanding the First Amendment political protest element, as an arson crime, of which there are many, and federal jurisdiction is particularly available for it. But if they try, not just in the chest beating rhetoric, but in court, to essentially characterize this as a crime of domestic terrorism, that means, first, it's got to be an act of violence that is designed to, could really have hurt somebody. And there's another element that, you're trying to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. That's what terrorists do. They take action that makes us all afraid we could be victims because anyone could be substituted for the person who the terrorist has chosen. Or you're trying to influence government policy through intimidation or coercion or affect government conduct. So maybe, okay, they're specifically targeted at us, so maybe this is a way to try to influence or coerce a civilian population. Seems a real stretch to me. Are you trying, maybe, if they're trying genuinely to keep anyone from going to get to a Tesla dealership because they're scared there'll be violence, and so they're intimidating civilians? Maybe. Or are they trying to influence government policy through intimidation or coercion? Really, it's visible and nasty, but this is intimidating the government or expressing political disapproval. So it's by way of saying that the department here could it depends exactly how it's charged, and we haven't seen it yet, but they could be getting over their skis, and would be a debacle for them to take these acts, which are crimes. I do not deny it. No federal prosecutor should, but make them some kind of political cause célèbre that would then require them to prove to a jury or judge these special extra elements that they can't prove because, say, the jury concludes these are people essentially protesting, not acting as terrorists. So they may have, gone too far. And again, worrisome that they are so much at the service of another citizen in this country. There's nothing. Crimes are against society. It's terrible to do crimes of violence, but it's not more terrible to do them against Elon Musk. And then just finally, this whole Pam Bondi, cowgirl, the days are over. It's, really way off base for what an attorney general is supposed to say and portray herself as doing. And that's another sort of problem sign. It makes it seem, especially, by the way, from somebody in an administration who talk about domestic terrorists, were completely unconcerned about letting out actual domestic terrorists who tried to defeat the peaceful transfer of power in society. And that was a matter of calling them political prisoners. Whereas here, going after Tesla dealerships, it portrays, in addition, at least the whiff of political favoritism in the application of U.S. federal criminal law, and that stinks also. So we have valid charges. We have charges for crimes that are federal crimes, but all the sort of atmospherics of them, statements of them, special, possibly, we'll find out, standout, more severe treatment of them are of a piece with what is a hopelessly, ludicrously, disgustingly politicized partisan Department of Justice there as vassals for Donald Trump, which we found out most vividly and repugnantly at Trump's speech and introduction by Bondi last Friday at the DOJ. And that makes what should be a straightforward case a possibly complicated one, and one that is part and parcel of overall huge problems at the DOJ. We'll have to see what the charges are, but they could be snatching defeat from the jaws of victory here, or even if they're making valid charges, doing it in a way that plays into the many ways in which our justice system has been now corrupted and essentially seized by people who just don't care, as all previous Republicans and Democrats have done, about doing justice based on truth and law without fear or favor. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.